Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated. We are very excited to present another exceptional AMTC with a whole host of exciting educational and networking opportunities. AMTC offers a healthy thank you to our host programs this year. And in recognition of their support and in what has become the custom, this year's conference decor features our local host programs on aisle signs, registration counters, and session signs. They also happen to star in the following video.
There we go. Good. Hands in behind your back again. There we go. That's it. Perfect. Okay. Great smile, gentlemen. Oh, there we go. Now give me a Charlie's Angels. There we go.
Welcome to Fort Worth, AMTC.
Give me a thumbs up. Thumbs down. There we go. That's it. Good. That's great. Simon says, hands in behind your back again. Give me a thumbs up. There we go. Good. Thumbs. Okay, back down. There we go. Good. Now wave at the camera. Wave at the camera. Wave at the camera. And do a high five or something to finish off.
And now I'd like to introduce Dave Evans, who is the chair of the AAMS board.
Let me find my notes here. Good morning, everyone. So thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Rick. Welcome to AMTC 2017. We're extremely excited to present another exceptional conference, a whole host of exciting educational and networking opportunities. The AMTC offers a hearty thank you to our host programs this year. Thank you. In recognition of their support and what has become the custom, this year's conference decor features our local host programs on aisle signs, registration counters, and session signs. They also happen to star in the following video, which you already saw. See, I told you I missed my notes. I'd like to also offer a special thank you to this year's AMTC 2017 sponsors. Simply put, without your support, it would be very difficult to hold an AMTC. So thoroughly enjoyed the staff and attendees alike. Thank you to our patron level sponsors, Airbus Helicopters, Leonardo Helicopters, MedTrans Corporation, PHI Air Medical, Sikorsky, a Lockheed Martin company, our contributor level sponsors, AirMed International, Children's Health, Metro Aviation, Children's Health, Textron Aviation, our supporter level sponsor, Cook Children's Teddy Bear Transport, sponsor of this morning's keynote session, Medevac Foundation International, and our friend level sponsors, Air Surface Transport Nurses Association, Baxter Healthcare, International Association of Medical Transport Communication Specialists, International Board of Specialty Certification, National EMS Pilots Association, and the Association of Air Medical Services. Sorry, this all got messed up here. My apologies. Before welcoming our keynote speaker to the stage, please allow me to cover a few housekeeping items. First, the AMTC exhibit hall will open for attendees today at noon. Meet us at the front of the hall for an official ribbon cutting at 12 o'clock, and come on down to the hall to grab lunch and visit this year's exhibitors for a large variety of products and services they will showcase here in Fort Worth. Also, Leonardo Helicopters will invite each of you back to the exhibit hall tonight at 5 p.m. this evening for their traditional opening reception. Of special note, and new to this year, the Community Awards presentations will begin with a hard start time of 7 p.m. here in Exhibit Hall F. Please be on time, as we don't want to miss any of your friends and colleagues receiving their awards, and this year we'll be announcing them all at once. Immediately afterwards, we're going to all head upstairs to the ballroom for the annual awards after party, celebrating this year's award winners, and join us for a buffet dinner and dancing. I'd now like to welcome to the stage the chairman of the Medevac Foundation, Johnny Delgado, for a special thank you.
Welcome. I'd like to add my welcome to AMTC and thank Rick and the AAMS board for allowing me a couple of minutes. With all of the crazy things that have happened the last 45 days, we as an organization and as a community would be remiss in not taking a moment to thank some incredible and amazing people. Most of them, and a lot of them, are in this room or watching via video stream as we speak. We all understand that wildfires and hurricanes and earthquakes, and I don't think there's anybody that hasn't figured out that Mother Nature was really angry this year. And we all appreciate that effect, but some pretty amazing things happen to highlight who we are as a community. I understand this firsthand because I was there for Harvey and Maria and Irma in Texas and in Florida and in Puerto Rico and in St. Croix with some pretty amazing people, and I got to see some spectacular performances from large, in the US-based air medical programs to the tiniest of Caribbean-based fixed-wing providers. It was flag neutral, country neutral, brand neutral. I saw people who compete on a daily basis helping load each other's aircraft and offload. How big was this? Just in the numbers as of Friday, we moved 515 people in the last 40 days from the collective storms. We performed on the empty legs of those flights another 600 relief supply missions to aid not only our people that were forward deployed and our air medical community and critical care transport folks, but the people who we were helping serve. That's almost 1,000 flights from our own collective members on top of well over 1,000 Mercy flight missions flown by our amazing military. I don't know about you, but I'm taken aback by how amazing we were, and the best part about all of this, and knock on wood, not one adverse patient event occurred, not one injury to a crew member occurred, not one accident occurred. It was interesting and amazing in our forward operating base in St. Croix to see on the sign and hear every briefing begin and end with one phrase: everyone goes home. So if there was a better statement to be made throughout all of this, is that A, we came together as a community. We didn't care what flag was being flown. We didn't care what brand we were working for. It was about patients and about people and about going home safe. On behalf of the Medevac Foundation and the Association of Air Medical Services and our community at large, please stand, give yourselves, and our friends still deployed working, a round of applause for a job well done so far. Thank you. Let's keep up the good work and go home safe. Now allow me to introduce back to the stage Rick Sherlock.
Before we go on, I would like to take a moment to say once again, please, during the course of this week, take a moment and reflect on the absolute wonderful impact that you have not only on the patients you serve, but their families and friends and in the communities that you live. You all have such an instant positive impact in people's lives that sometimes it's easy to get lost in the day-to-day crisis du jour and not actually take a moment to step back and reflect the impact you have on people's lives and the communities which you serve around the nation and around the world. So please, at some time this week, take a moment and reflect what that is and how you contribute to it. And thank you very much for what you do on an everyday basis. Before we go on again, I'd like to have those members of the boards of directors and trustees of AAMS, the Medevac Foundation, AMPA, ASNA, IAFCCP, IAMTCS, and NEMSPA stand if you're in the room, please. Ladies and gentlemen, these are your boards. These are our partner association boards. And I'd also like to have you interact with them this week, get an opportunity, if you have questions or have feedback for them, to go talk to them, seek them out, get to know them. They represent you in the discussions that occur, and I'd like to thank them for their efforts, and thanks again for what you do as a volunteer board member. Thanks. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce today's keynote speaker, Joe Tye. Joe is the CEO and head coach of Values Coach, which provides consulting, training, and coaching on values-based leadership and cultural transformation for hospital and corporate clients. Culture does not change until people change. Joe earned a master's degree in hospital administration from the University of Iowa and an MBA from the Stanford Graduate School of Business. He is the author and co-author of 12 books. His newest book is All Hands on Deck, 8 Essential Lessons for Building a Culture of Ownership, a business parable with a crucial real-world message for today's organizations. Prior to founding Values Coach in 1994, Joe was Chief Operating Officer for a large community teaching hospital. On the volunteer front, he was the founding president of the Association of Air Medical Services and a leading activist fighting against unethical tobacco industry marketing practices. Joe and his wife Sally have 2 adult children. They live on a small farmstead in Iowa, and their second home is a tent in the Grand Canyon. So please give them a warm welcome and your full attention. Thanks very much. Enjoy this morning and enjoy the rest of the show.
Good morning. You know, at Values Coach, we teach a course on personal values. It's called the 12 Core Action Values. And in that course, core action value number 10 is enthusiasm. Can we try this again? Good morning. That's more what I was hoping for from this group. Would you like to know what enthusiasm really looks like? Isn't that enthusiasm? And we were all born with that kind of enthusiasm, that kind of joy for life. And what happens? We come to conferences. And how do we get it back? You have to stop worrying about what other people think of you. And trust me on this one, you will worry a whole lot less about what other people think of you if you will admit to yourself how infrequently other people think of you. And I want to remind you why it is we do what we do. My mom is 88 years old. She lives in the Army retirement community in San Antonio, Texas. My dad was a retired Air Force officer. He passed away about a year ago. And earlier this year, I got a call from Northeast Methodist Hospital in San Antonio. My mom's been admitted. So, of course, I hop on a flight. I fly down to San Antonio. I go to the hospital. I come up to the nurse's station where my mom is, and I say, "Can you direct me to the room of Joe Tye?" And the lady behind the counter smiles, and she says, "Oh, you mean the lady who's been asking for a hot dog?" I say, no, my mom is 88 years old. Yeah, she's the one. So I go into my mom's room, and there she is. Isn't she lovely? And there's this tray of untouched food in front of her. And I said, "What's the matter, Mom? Isn't it any good?" And she says, "Well, Joby," that's what they call me at home. She said, "Well, Joby, I'm sure it's just fine, but what I really want is a hot dog. And they don't have hot dogs at the hospital here." That afternoon, her nurse, Arturo, went out of the hospital to a local diner and came back and brought my mom a hot dog. Now, look at the look on my mom's face. That is what great patient satisfaction looks like. Look at the look on Arturo's face. That is what great employee engagement looks like. And I will point out to you, it is not in his job description to go buy an old lady a hot dog. He could not be held accountable for buying or not buying my mom a hot dog. Those are things he added to his job description. And if your organization doesn't have your patients, your clients, your customers looking like this, and if it doesn't have your employees looking like this, then you have room to grow to become a great organization and a great place to work. This is my daughter, Annie. We're very proud of Annie. Annie has just graduated with her PhD in neurobiology research. with a special focus on cortical spreading depression, photophobia, and migraine headache. I have no idea what all that means, but that's what she does. And Annie is one of those kids who was born going 180 miles an hour, just charging through life like an out-of-control rocket. And when Annie was a little girl, about 18 months old, we paid a visit to my wife's parents. You know, the visit to the grandparents. And Annie is racing around this house, exploring, tearing things apart. She comes charging in through the living room at the only speed she knows, 180 miles an hour, and Grandpa's in there. Now, Grandpa's an outdoorsman. He spends a lot of time on the lake, so he's very tan. He is also as bald as a cue ball. And he's sitting there in his reading chair, got on these little square Ben Franklin reading glasses, book in his lap, and he comes charging in 180 miles an hour, pigtails flopping up and down. She runs smack dab into Grandpa, stops dead cold in her tracks. Her eyes pop open, her jaw drops down, and she just stares. Any parents in the room? You know how inquisitive a toddler can be, don't you? And you know how honest a toddler can be. And she stares and stares. And then she laughs, looks over at Grandma, and says, "Grandma, I have a Mr. Potato Head too." And isn't it true that you and I can both look at a third person and think we see somebody totally different on the basis of the most superficial things? The costume they wear to work, the car they drive, the color of their skin. Isn't it also true that you and I can both look in the mirror and pretend to see less than what's really there, looking back at us? I found this picture on the internet. And isn't this a beautiful metaphor for life? Because the challenge in life is, how do you stop pretending to be less than who you really are? How do you look in the mirror and see, who could I be if I didn't let fear stop me from doing what I have to do? Who could I be if I stopped listening to that negative voice in the back of my head and talked back to it and said, "Don't tell me what I can't do"? Who could I be if I did a better job of living my values? And I know everybody in this room has great values, but for every one of us, there is a gap between our ideal and what we actually see reflected in our checkbook registers and our calendars and in how we treat each other and in the kind of goals we pursue. And the challenge in life is, how do you close that gap? I love this bumper sticker. I used to have superhuman powers, but my therapist took them all away. And isn't that what happens to us? You ask any little kid, what do you want to be when you grow up, and what do they think they can be? There's a hint on the slide up here. There was a hint on the slide up there. Is anyone seeing the slides? Huh. What do little kids think they can be? Superheroes, Superman, Batman, president. Have you ever asked a little kid, what do you want to be when you grow up, and had him say, "Oh, I want to sit in a tiny cubicle and do spreadsheets till I get laid off"? Is that what kids dream about? But what happens to us? We go to school, we run into teachers and schoolyard bullies. We go to work, we run into bosses and toxic coworkers. And gradually the dreams die. The Bible asks the question, who would light a candle and put a basket over it? But you know, that's what happens. We go to work, we get called nasty names like overachiever. What's wrong with that? Quota buster, brown noser, apple polisher. How many ways do we have to tell someone to stop trying to stand out, just be ordinary like all the rest of us? And the basket comes down over the candle, and we look at our watch and we say, only 14 years, 9 months, 7 weeks, 3 days, and 52 minutes till retirement. And life sucks, then you die. And the challenge is, how do you reclaim, remember, re-spark that dream, that you once were? And this is the truth. You will never exceed the expectations you set for yourself. And if you look in the mirror and you see Mr. or Mrs. Potato Head looking back at you, if you pretend to be less than who you really are, you will never exceed that. And nothing out there, success or failure, will not change you. They will make you more of who you already are. And your challenge is, how do you become a bigger, stronger person to prepare yourself for that success that you will achieve? And you will never exceed the limitations that you place upon yourself. You know what negative self-talk is? It is telling yourself lies about yourself, believing the lies are true, and as you embrace the lie, it becomes your reality, and you start pretending to be less than who you really are, and you cheat all the rest of us by settling for anemic dreams and goals instead of giving us your very best. This is a statue by Bobby Carlyle. She's an artist in Colorado, and it's called Self-Made Man. And this man has a hammer in one hand and a chisel in the other, and he is carving himself out of a big piece of stone. And isn't that another great metaphor for life? Because that's what life's all about. How do you carve away those parts of you that are not you at your best, those parts of you that you're not proud of? And how do you build up those parts of you that are you at your best? And you know, some of us carve great statues and we do impressive things. The people in this room, that you're doing things, as we just heard from Johnny, you're doing great things to help the world. But there are a lot of people who their statue is a little bobblehead on the dashboard. And the work that you choose to do and the attitude that you choose to bring to that work, more than any other thing, that is the hammer and the chisel that you carve the character of you. Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, said, character is destiny. And so if you want to work on big goals, if you want to make a difference, the first challenge is, how do you work on being a better person yourself? How do you build that strength of character? Now, at Values Coach, we work with a lot of organizations, almost all in healthcare, some outside. We've done a lot of work on culture. I've put a lot of thought into what makes a great place to work, what makes a great culture. And this is the single most important insight we have. It guides all of our work. Culture does not change unless and until people change, because the culture of your organization is defined by the collective attitudes and behaviors of the people who work there. And that's why so many programs fail. You bring in the program of the month, you give everybody a book, you give them a script or a happy face pin or some such thing, and a month later, it's like nothing happened because nobody made a personal change. But people will not change unless you give them a new approach. Give them some new tools. Inspire them to use those tools. We have all tried to change and failed, haven't we? Every one of us has the New Year's resolution that was dead on arrival. Every one of us have said, oh, this year I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to quit smoking. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to apply to graduate school. I'm finally going to write the book. And at the end of the year, we look at our to-do list, and it is still there. And so how do we give people a new approach and inspire them to take that approach? You know the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting somehow a different outcome. By that definition, we are all a little bit crazy. I got a letter from the CEO of a hospital we've been working with for several years. And he said, I got a whole new team and I didn't have to change the people because they changed themselves. And I have come to see that as the gold standard of culture change. When enough people make a personal commitment to change themselves, to change their attitudes and their behaviors and how they treat each other, then you will achieve a sustained and positive change in your culture. And if that doesn't happen, then you're just doing more programs of the month. So imagine this. You go to the airport, you're going to catch a flight, you're there a bit early, and there's two people there, and one of them is really weird. Which one is weird? Over in one corner, there is a guy with a cheeseburger that is so gross, he had to drive a stake through its heart to kill it before he could eat it. And over in the hallway, there's a woman doing push-ups. In our society, which one of those two people is weird? Hideously gross cheeseburger or doing push-ups? Okay, in the world of public speaking, this is what's known as audience participation. Which one is weird, cheeseburger or push-ups? And what's wrong with this picture? You want to not take care of yourself. You want to sit and eat a cheeseburger. You want to slouch down and read the sports page of USA Today. And you're normal. You go out in the hallway and you do push-ups. Well, trust me on this one. If you're ever in a crowded airport and you can't find a place to sit and you want a little space, drop to the floor and start doing push-ups. You will have all the space you want, I guarantee it. I was at a big nursing conference recently, and the speaker had just announced this new initiative from the American Nurses Association. It's a wonderful thing. It's called Healthy Nurse, Healthy Nation. The average nurse is far less healthy than the average person, and what kind of an example are we setting? And so ANA is saying, well, let's set a better example. I thought that's a great idea. And then I took this picture. These are people coming out of that workshop. What is wrong with this picture? If you want to be a better, stronger person, you got to do your push-ups, you got to take the stairs, and you got to be different than everybody else, and you got to not worry about what other people think of you. These two people have the same job, but what's different? There's a hint on the bottom of the slide. Attitude. Same job, different attitude. Who do you think is happier, dances with mops or mopes with mop? Who would you rather work with, dances or mopes? Who would you rather live with, dances or mopes? You guys are having a hard time making up your minds this morning. Not enough caffeine in the coffee. Most important question, who would you rather be like yourself, dances or mopes? Single most important decision, most important choice you make every single day is the choice of the attitude that you bring to the work that you do. There is no attitude gene. It is a choice that you make. Sometimes it's a hard choice when things aren't going well. It is always a choice that you make. Now, this guy, eating more broccoli is not going to help this guy be more healthy, is it? What's he going to have to do if he wants to be more healthy? What's this guy going to have to do first? Okay, I thought I had a room of health professionals here. Quit smoking. If this guy doesn't quit smoking, he can go to the gym, he can get on the treadmill, he can eat broccoli. He's still not going to be healthy. He's certainly not going to be optimally healthy. And that is a great metaphor for changing at a personal level and for changing an organization at a cultural level. If you don't have the courage to address negative attitudes and negative behaviors in your organization, then it doesn't matter how many happy face pins you give people. It doesn't matter if you bring in Studer or Covey or Disney or Values Coach. You're going to be right back where you were before long. And at a personal level, if you don't have the courage to stand up to that voice of negative self-talk that says you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not pretty enough, you don't deserve to be successful, and if you don't stand up to that voice and say, sit down, shut up, and watch me do it, then you will underachieve yourself. You will underperform what your potential is. You cannot complain your way to success. You cannot complain your way to happiness, but complaining is the disease epidemic of America today and much of the rest of the world. And it is an invisible barrier on the potential of your organization. The more people complain, the more you lower the ceiling of what is possible in your organization. And that is the real leadership challenge. The real leadership challenge is how do you inspire people to change their attitudes about what's going on around them, about what's going on within them. And when enough people make that change, make that commitment to be a better, stronger person at a personal level, culture cannot help but become more positive. So you all saw, as you came in, you saw my friend the pickle guy. He's up on the stage with me now. And shortly, I'm going to explain why he's here and what he's going to be asking of you. You all have, if you didn't, you can get one at the registration desk or the AAMS office. You all have a pickle-free zone door hanger. Imagine that. Somebody comes into your office to whine and complain, and you can say, oh, I'm sorry, this is a pickle-free zone. There's no complaining allowed. There's no gossiping allowed in my workspace. Go see your therapist. He gets paid to hear it. I don't. He's been trained to hear it. I'm not. So go do something positive about it. And you all have one of those. And you all have, and I'll explain this shortly, you all have a pickle challenge tally sheet so that as you go through the conference, anytime you catch yourself bitching, moaning, whining, or complaining, you know, the other BMW club, you just mark a little, on the inside there's a whole bunch of circles, you mark those circles. And I'm going to show you what you're going to do with that here shortly as well. But here's the problem, and we see this every time we talk to a CEO. You don't think you have a problem. It's everybody else. Every CEO I talk to says, oh, we got a great culture. I say, oh, really? Let's not make an assumption, because what happens when you take the word assume and break it down, what do you get? Let me introduce you. And so I'm going to show you a quick video here about the dangers of making unwarranted assumptions.
Here we are, together all alone, in the still of the night, and baby, all I know, my poor heart skips a beat when you're next to me, in the still of the night. Well, here we are, just you and me like this, with every sweet caress and with every tender kiss.
You see, you make assumptions about yourself, about what other people see when they look at you, about your own culture. Without empirically testing those assumptions, you're really asking for trouble. So we've been hearing about this healthcare crisis. When did it begin? Did the repeal of Obamacare effort start the healthcare crisis? Did Obamacare start it? Does it go all the way back to the Balanced Budget Amendment, HMOs, DRGs, all the way back to Medicare, Medicaid? You know what? I think the very first person ever to utter the words healthcare crisis was probably Florence Nightingale in November of 1854 when she walked into the Scutari Barrack Hospital with 38 other nurses back in the day when nurse didn't mean anything or what it means today. The place was filthy dirty. The medical care was abysmal. The mortality rate exceeded 50%. Thousands of soldiers had died in that place, always in agony. The food was miserable. She wrote a letter home to her dad and she said, "This place is the kingdom of hell." It truly was a healthcare crisis. But instead of throwing her hands up and quitting, the way so many people in healthcare today have, that incredible woman, she rolled up her sleeves and she went to work. And in the next 2 years, more than any other individual ever, she defined what it means to be a nurse and established nursing as a true Any nurses in the room? Have you heard of Florence Nightingale before? I mean, what other profession can point to one individual? I mean, who's the founder of banking? Who's the person who defined auto mechanics as a profession? The way that Florence Nightingale had an impact on nursing. Not only that, she was the first hospital administrator. I mean, I'm a recovering hospital administrator. I go to meetings, I have a sponsor, a little book. And my former profession owes her every bit the debt that nursing does. We just don't acknowledge it. And more than any other person in a 2-year period at the Scutari Barrack Hospital, she created a blueprint for the hospital as we know it today. First hospital housekeeping, laundry, maintenance services, first hospital infection control, first hospital food service. I mean, she literally, every department in your hospitals, those of you who are in hospitals, every department, you can trace its roots back to a 2-year period where Florence Nightingale thought through the blueprint for the hospital as we know it today. When will the healthcare crisis end? Let me give you a hint. You know, you will never have it better than you have it today. Reimbursement will never be easier than it is today. Never be more lucrative than it is today. Competition will always be tougher than it is today. It's going to get harder and harder to recruit as we head into what is, I believe, going to be the worst staffing shortage in the history of healthcare in the next 10 years. Things will never get easier and better than they are today. We have to get tougher and more resilient. Imagine you're going with me and our guide from Outward Bound on a river trip. We've been out on the water all day. It's a lovely day. The sun is shining. We're having a great time. We stop on this white sandy beach for lunch. Our guide comes around. Are you having fun? Oh, yeah, this is great. And he says, well, don't get too complacent because the real adventure hadn't started yet. We get back out on the water. It's going faster and rougher, and suddenly we drop down into this maelstrom of white water. And our guide there in the back of the boat hollers out, "Hang on, folks, this is it. The Class 5 rapids I've warned you about all week long. Everybody grab a paddle, dig in, and paddle for your life." And that guy in the back of the boat says, "I don't paddle. That's not my job." What do? That's right, throw him out of the boat. When you are in Class 5 rapids, I don't care what your name tag says. You pick up a paddle and you do your part. Whether you think it's the best of times or the worst of times in healthcare today, it is turbulent, it is challenging times. And we cannot afford people saying things like, "Not my job, somebody else's job." We need people to be thinking like owners. Let's do another river trip. Imagine you are the captain of this beautiful galley ship, and it is your job to get it across the water on time, on budget, with your cargo intact. And you have 100 people at the oars. Of those 100 people, 25 of them believe in the values and the vision and the mission, and they're putting their backs into the work. 60 of them just going through the motions, doing the least they can to get by. Another day, another dollar. Work sucks, then you die. And 15 of those rowers are actually rowing backwards. Would you be proud to be captain of a ship like that? Rick, I was hoping for a more emphatic response from your group here. How would you feel if you were one of the 25%ers giving it your all? How would you feel about the 60%ers just doing the job description but nothing more, and the 15%ers making your work harder by not doing theirs and criticizing you for wanting to do an excellent job? And unfortunately, folks, that is a picture of the average organization in America today. Gallup, Press Ganey, our company, everybody who studies employee engagement finds pretty much the same picture. In the average organization, about 25% of people are engaged. They show up every day with their hard hat and their lunch pail ready to give it their all. 60% of people are not engaged. That doesn't mean they're doing a bad job necessarily, but it's just a job, and at quitting time they're out of there. And 15% are aggressively disengaged. Now, there's obviously a huge range. We have worked with hospitals where if you're not engaged, you get voted off the island by your colleagues. They don't want you there. Almost everybody in EMS, I think that's the case. We have also worked with hospitals where it feels like nobody's engaged. And we've worked with hospitals where in some departments it's 100%, and in other departments it's quitting time and they're out of there. And the question is, where do you fall? Where does your organization fall? And what can you do to raise the level, not just of your own silo, but of the people that you work with through your example and your expectations of other people? Those highly engaged people, we call them spark plugs, because that's what they do. Everybody in this room is a spark plug, almost by definition. And you can tell they walk into a room with a smile and a can-do attitude, and they lift the spirits of everybody else. And then you have the zombies. You know some of these people. Another day, another dollar. You ever hop in your car to drive somewhere and wonder how you got there? That's how they go through their day. And then you have the emotional vampires, the people who suck the life out of an organization, suck the joy out of the work, suck the energy out of everybody around them. And it does not take very many of these people to drag down the morale and wreck the culture of an organization. The same way, if one person in this room lit a cigarette, it would instantly pollute the lungs of everybody else in the room. And we don't tolerate that anymore. One toxic, negative person with whining and complaining and talking about other people behind their backs, one toxic, negative person can suck the life out of an entire department. And that gets me to this journey that we're challenging organizations to make from a culture of accountability, which is actually a very low bar, to a culture of ownership. You take the word accountable and break it down, it means able to be counted. And you cannot count the things that really matter, especially in healthcare. You know, think of the metaphors that we use for accountability. I'm going to have to start cracking the whip around here. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. These are medieval forms of torture. Accountability is doing what you're supposed to do because it's expected of you. It is extrinsically imposed motivation. It's the motivation of the carrot and the stick, of reward and punishment. Imagine this conversation. Guy's out walking in the woods with his son. He said, "Son, you'll be proud of your old man because today the boss held me accountable." Can you think of any way that man would finish that sentence in a way that would make his son be more proud of him? That would make him walk into work tomorrow with a little more swagger in his step. You know, back in the 90s, the buzzword was empowerment. We're all going to do empowerment. You don't hear that very much anymore. It's like, well, we tried the empowerment thing, it didn't work. Now we're going to crack the whip and hold our feet to the fire and hold them accountable. And the problem is, as Farson and Keyes in their wonderful book on innovation point out, accountability works great in the short run. But over time, it will create a culture of evasion, denial, and finger pointing. Can you think of any examples in the real world recently where this has happened? How about Wells Fargo, where you had lots of people being held accountable for aggressive sales goals, and they felt like the only way they could meet those sales goals was to cheat? How about the Veterans Health Administration? 14-day turnaround time or head's going to roll, and people cheated. And in a culture of accountability where there's no sense of personal accountability or ownership, you're setting yourself up for a lot of trouble. And as I said, especially in healthcare, you cannot hold people accountable for the things that really matter. How do you hold somebody accountable for compassion or empathy? How do you crack the whip to make somebody more proud of their organization? How do you hold their feet to the fire to enhance loyalty? Nobody ever checks the oil in a rental car. When I take my rental cars back, and I rent a lot of cars, I never wash it and wax it, and I don't check the oil because I'm not accountable. I'll put gas in the tank if that's in my contract, but that's all I'm going to do. And how many people are just renting a spot on the organization chart? Ownership is a much higher bar. It is doing what needs to be done, doing the right thing, even if it's not in your job description. And here's the deal. When people are willing to walk across hot coals on their own because they're thinking and acting like owners, you don't have to hold their feet to the fire. They're doing it themselves. Most important 3 words in the book, The Florence Prescription, that I did are proceed until apprehended. And these are 2 of my favorite chief nurse executives. And the subtitle, Leadership Does Not Require a Management Title. You know, anybody in any organization can provide leadership, and we need more people doing that. Now, here's a guy who's got a dream, and he's got the gumption to pursue his dream, and he's got a proceed until apprehended mindset, and what's he about to run into? I once had someone say disappointment. I thought, well, there's the understatement. But you know what? If he keeps digging, they're not going to follow him. And that's a pretty good metaphor. You know, if you're doing the right thing and you take initiative, nobody's going to stop you. Have you seen this video on YouTube, United Breaks Guitars? If you haven't, you really ought to see it. This man is Dave Carroll. He's the lead singer for a band from Halifax, Nova Scotia. And they were on their way to play a concert in Nebraska. Plane stops at O'Hare. He looks out the window and he sees the baggage handlers throwing their gear around. He goes running up to the flight attendant. Hey, that stuff is fragile. Will you tell them to be careful? And she says, I don't do bags. That's not my job. They get to Omaha. He opens the case of his Taylor guitar and it's been broken. $1,200 worth of damage. He writes United, you broke my guitar. You owe me $1,200. They write back and say, not our problem. They go back and forth for 9 months until he gets the final no from Miss Earlwig at United. And he said, fine. If you don't reimburse me for the guitar you broke, I'm going to write a song about you. And they said, well, you go right ahead. As of late last night, last time I checked, 35,472,691 people have viewed United Breaks Guitars 1, 2, and 3. More than 140,000 people have rated it an average of 5 out of 5 stars on YouTube. And more than 50,000 people have posted comments, almost all of which say United sucks. The Taylor Guitar Company made their own video. how to pack up your Taylor guitar so United won't break it. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, then what did they start doing? Throw a little girl off a plane because she's wearing leggings. Beat up Dr. David Dow and drag him off while everybody's got their cell phones out videotaping it. And then the cartoonists go to town. And you get something like this.
We're going on a trip to Disney World. And we're flying United Airlines.
I know you really want to see that again. Let's see if we can do that. Can we do that again? There we go.
We're going on a trip to Disney World. And we're flying United Airlines.
You know, how do you spell marketing public relations black eye? I mean, literally hundreds of millions of dollars done to the brand image of United Airlines because not one person was thinking like an owner. Not one person said to Dave Carroll, Dave, I am going to make sure that you get reimbursed for that guitar. If one person had done that, he might never have done the song. Not one person said to those police who dragged that man off screaming after beating him up, not one United employee said, you can't do that to my customers. Not one was thinking like an owner. And you know, one person could have stopped all these things from happening. And you know who the real losers are in this picture? The fine men and women who work at United, because they have all been painted with this brush that says, you don't care, and it's not true, and it's not fair. I fly United all the time. You probably do too. I love them. I love United. For one thing, they have never killed me in a plane crash. I know what a low bar that is, but hey. And if I'm nice to them first, they're always nice to me. See, the problem at United is not the people. The problem at United is they have a broken culture and they are not fixing that culture seriously. And this is why they got taken over by a much smaller airline, Continental. This is why their CEO and CFO got fired a little over a year ago. This is why they let these kind of things happen and they don't deal with it because they have a culture that's really a focus on accountability and not ownership. And the invisible architecture of any organization, the stuff you can't see, is far more important than the bricks and the mortar when it comes to the things that really matter. At Values Coach, we call it the blueprint behind the blueprint. And most of us have never put much thought into that. You know, we detail the bricks and mortar with incredible thought and attention, and then we let what goes on the inside just evolve haphazardly. And the invisible architecture, in a very real sense, is the soul of your organization, the way bricks and mortar are the body. A couple of years ago, I was at a small hospital here in Texas. 6:30 in the morning, I show up for my program. I'm not much of a morning person. I walk in the front door. It is beautiful. Stone wall, fireplace, fish tank. Lady behind the counter says, good morning. Can I help you find something? And I blink hard. I say, well, yes, ma'am. I'm looking for your conference room. And she says, well, I would be happy to take you there. Are you our speaker today, Mr. Tye? I blink again. I say, yes, ma'am, that's me. She says, we are so excited to have you here. Why, we've been looking forward to this all month long. She comes around from behind the counter, takes my hand in both of hers, and says, welcome to Glen Rose. Can I get you something to drink? I blink again. I say, well, yes, ma'am. I would love a Miller Lite. And without missing a beat, Marie says, well, darling, I'll see what I can do. 10:30 that morning, I'm in a room like this full of people in the middle of a presentation, and who do you think comes walking in with a tray, a frosty mug, and an open bottle of Miller Lite? And you know, I usually don't drink in the morning, but my mom taught me when somebody offers you something, it is rude. Now, what am I going to remember about that hospital? The bricks and the mortar, the fireplace, the fish tank, or Marie? And where's the blueprint for Marie? Where is the thought that has been put into, this is how we treat each other. This is how we treat our customers. This is how we treat a new employee who comes in. Have you heard that hideous metaphor, nurses eat their young? It is a metaphor, right? I mean, what a heartbreaking thing. I have spoken with young nurses who tell me they think it was a mistake to become a nurse because of the way they got treated the first week on the job by the wicked witch of the unit. And there is something desperately wrong with this picture. Walmart and Costco, they're in the same business, aren't they? They sell the same kind of products to the same target market with the same sort of employees, but the experience of working for or shopping with could not be any more different. When Business Week ran a cover story on Costco, they wrote about ecstatic employees. Tell me, have you ever heard Walmart accused of having ecstatic employees? People have to pay for the privilege of shopping at Costco. They won't let you in the front door without a paid membership card. People shop at Walmart because they don't have to dress up like they do for the dollar store. And if you think I'm kidding, go to the website, People of Walmart. United and Southwest, they're in the same business. They buy the same planes from Boeing. But again, the experience of flying or working with could not be more different. One way that's reflected is in the pre-flight. See, on United, the flight attendants think they've done the job when they read the script, even if nobody is listening, and nobody ever is on United. At Southwest Airlines, they know that's not the job. The job is making sure people hear it, because it's important. And so if you have David Holmes here do it as a rap song, he will not let you ignore him. And somebody pulls out a cell phone, videotapes it, it goes viral, millions of dollars of free advertising for Southwest Airlines. And then there's the Southwest Airlines flight attendant who starts with this. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you all to know that today we have a very special passenger flying with us. John Taylor's on board, and it is his birthday. He is 102 years old today. And you know what they told me when they wheeled him on this morning with his O2 tank? This is the first time in his entire life he's ever been on a jet airplane. So folks, on your way out, would you all kindly stick your head in the cockpit and say happy birthday? Now tell me, with that introduction, are you going to listen to the safety instructions? And over time, the attitude in the workplace is defined by two things: what you say you expect and what you tolerate, and what you tolerate will dominate what you say you expect. You say, we expect integrity, but your culture tolerates two people talking about a coworker behind that person's back, violating your integrity and that person's dignity. You have lowered your bar. I took this picture at the Atlanta airport. Southwest Airlines advertisement. Picture of a Southwest Airlines flight attendant. It says, all airline employees have attitudes, ours just have the good kind. Tell me, what would happen if United Airlines ran that exact same ad? Somebody would paint a picture of a mustache on the flight attendant. I said that once to another group, and I said, who would do that? And somebody in the audience shouted out, another United employee. And you know how true that is. So the question for you is, if your company or your hospital, wherever you work, ran an ad like that, would your people roll their eyes and say, oh yeah, right? Or would they be wearing the name tag that says, I'm proud to be part of this? These are the values trainers. We do a Train the Trainer course on personal values at the Alaska VA healthcare system in Anchorage. Their attitude's so amazing, they reached out beyond the walls of their healthcare system, called up the local homeless shelter and said, we've adopted you. We want to help. What can we do? And the director said, we can get people to donate everything we need, except toilet paper. It's just not sexy. And so they launched Operation Wipeout. This is heartbreaking. We do a culture assessment survey at Values Coach. And one of the questions says, our people reflect positive attitudes, treat others with respect, and refrain from complaining, gossiping, and pointing fingers. I recently collated the last 43 surveys. More than 11,000 all healthcare people responded. More people disagreed with that statement than agreed with it. And almost Only 5% of people strongly agreed. I submit to you that is a problem. In fact, I submit to you that you cannot provide great care with a lousy attitude. Cy Wakeman, in her book, No Ego, says the average worker spends 2.5 hours a day on drama. Nobody here does. Anyone here spend 2.5 hours a day whining and complaining? Show of hands. That means somebody else is doing a whole lot more if Cy is right, and our research shows he is. I do a lot of live polling where I'll ask people, what percent of all paid hours in your organization get wasted on bitching, moaning, whining, and complaining? And as in this slide, more often than not, people say it's more than 20%. And from that, we can calculate how much money is the hospital paying people to bitch, moan, whine, and complain. This is an actual critical access hospital in Colorado, $3 million a year. This is an actual larger community hospital in the Midwest, $13+ million a year, and a multi-institutional healthcare system on the East Coast, almost $120 million a year. What could you do with that kind of money? Investing in better patient care, investing in personal education. And all it takes is for one toxic person to pollute an entire room. Bob Dent, he's my good friend, colleague, client. He's the COO, CNO at Midland Memorial Hospital in West Texas, and a co-author now. And when we were doing research for this book, Building a Culture of Ownership in Healthcare, we were so appalled with the references to incivility, bullying, disrespect, disengagement, compassion fatigue in healthcare that we called it the healthcare crisis within. And we may or may not be able to do anything about Obamacare, Trump care, whatever's coming at us from out there. This is something that we can deal with. All it takes is for us to make different and better choices. So recently I was at the MTLI conference. I had about 50 people or so in the room. We did a pre-survey. Here's what some of them told me. I am personally committed to the values of my organization. 100% agreed or strongly agreed. Is that good? Anyone awake? Is that good? Of course. I am personally determined to give my best at work every day. 100% agreed or strongly agreed. To which I said, really? Because the next question, our people don't complain about problems, they work to find solutions, and more people disagreed with that than agreed with it, and only one person out of 51 strongly agreed. You know, this is like Lake Wobegon, where all the children are above average. You cannot have me at 100% and everybody else below. That means that we're all guilty of this. We're all guilty of saying, I'm not the problem. And we all are the problem. Did you see this video? It's on YouTube, Louis C.K. It's called Everything's Amazing and Nobody's Happy. You really got to see this. And I'm not going to...
It's a lot of trust back then.
Well, I guess you're going to see it.
Those were simpler times, I think. I just feel like we may be going back to that, by the way. But in a way, good, because when I read things like the foundations of capitalism are shattering, I'm like, maybe we need that. Maybe we need some time where we're walking around with a donkey with pots clanging on the sides.
You think that would just bring us back to reality?
Yeah, because everything is amazing right now, and nobody's happy. Like, in my lifetime, the changes in the world have been incredible. When I was a kid, we had a rotary phone. We had a phone that you had to stand next to, and you had to dial it.
Yes.
You realize how primitive? You're making sparks in a phone, and you actually would hate people with zeros in their numbers because it was more like, oh, this guy's got 2 zeros. Screw that guy. Why do I want to? And then if they called and you weren't home, the phone would just ring lonely by itself. And then if you wanted money, you had to go in the bank for when it was open for like 3 hours. You had to stand in line, write yourself a check like an idiot. And then when you ran out of money, you just go, well, I can't do any more things now.
Right.
I can't do any more things.
That's it, yeah.
That was it. And even if you had a credit card, the guy would go, ugh, and he'd bring out this whole shunk, and he'd write, oh, you'd have to call the president to see if you have any money. And
it's all true, kids. You had to call the president, yeah. It was ridiculous.
Yes.
Do you feel that we now, in the 21st century, we take technology for granted?
Well, yeah, because now we live in an amazing, amazing world, and it's wasted on the crappiest generation of just spoiled idiots that don't care, because this is what people are like now. They got their phone, and they're like, it won't. Give it a second. It's going to space. Can you give it a second to get back from space? Is the speed of light too slow? I was on an airplane and there was internet, high-speed internet on the airplane. That's the newest thing that I know exists. And I'm sitting on the plane and they go, open up your laptop, you can go on the internet. And it's fast and I'm watching YouTube clips. I'm in an airplane. And then it breaks down. And they apologize, the internet's not working. The guy next to me goes, this is bull. Like how quickly the world owes him something he knew existed only 10 seconds ago.
Right.
And on planes, flying is the worst one because people come back from flights and they tell you their story. And it's like a horror story. They act like their flight was like a cattle car in the 40s in Germany. That's how bad they make it sound.
Right.
They're like, it was the worst day of my life. First of all, we didn't board for 20 minutes. Right. And then we get on the plane, and they made us sit there on the runway for 40 minutes. We had to sit there. Oh, really? What happened next? Did you fly through the air incredibly like a bird? Did you partake in the miracle of human flight, you non-contributing zero that you got to fly? You're flying! It's amazing. Everybody on every plane should just constantly be going, oh my God! Wow!
Yes!
You're flying. You're sitting in a chair in the sky.
Yes. Yeah. He's right. Now, Louis.
But it doesn't go back a lot. and it's not really. You know, here's the thing. People they say there's delays on flights.
Yeah.
Delays, really? New York to California in 5 hours. That used to take 30 years to do that, and a bunch of you would die on the way there and have a baby. You'd be a whole different group of people by the time you got there. Now you watch a movie and you take a dump and you're home.
Yeah. Nicer way to say it than that, but yeah.
No.
Do any of you fly? Has he more or less nailed it? Will Bowen, in his book, A Complaint-Free World, said we complain to get sympathy, attention, and because we don't have the courage to actually do something, it's much easier to whine about it. And he asks us to imagine a complaint-free world. And I'm asking you to imagine a complaint-free world. And I want to share with you a simple promise that will change your life. And if enough people take this promise to heart, it'll change your organization. And it's the Pickle Pledge. It says, I will turn every complaint, my head is killing me, into a blessing. Thank God for modern pharmacology. Or a constructive suggestion. First symptom of dehydration is a headache, I should drink some water. I had to park 6 blocks away and walk all the way to the mall. Thank God you have legs. Thank God you have a mall and you don't live in Haiti or Puerto Rico. Oh, by the way, if you ate fewer donuts and spent more time at the gym, walking 6 blocks wouldn't be such a hardship. So what we're saying to people is enjoy eating your pickles, just don't look like you've been sucking on one. And this simple promise will change your life. I was, 2 years ago, almost, I had my first ever horizontal experience in a hospital. I had acute diverticulitis. About 4 days in, the surgery resident comes in. She says, Joe, the treatment's not working. We're going to have to do surgery, cut out part of your colon, and give you a colostomy bag. And I said, no way, I would rather die. And she said, well, that's another option. And when she left the room, I looked, you know, the whiteboards that we have in all the hospital rooms. I looked at my whiteboard, and I had the Pickle Pledge there, and I said, I will turn every complaint, this really sucks, into a blessing. Thank God they saved my life. I would have died. And thank God for morphine, and a constructive suggestion. And the only thing I could think of to do is grab my IV pole and start walking. And I walked all night long. I walked around that nurse's station, and I talked to myself. I talked to my colon, I literally did. And for the next 8 days, I walked a little farther every day. I talked to myself in a positive way every day. And I walked out of that hospital with my colon intact, 25 pounds lighter, and a commitment to do a better job with my health, my diet, and exercise. And I'm absolutely convinced that as important as the IVs were, and thank God for morphine, my attitude about what was happening was as important or more important. That promise will change your life if you take it to heart. But it's something you have to do every day. And if enough people where you work take it to heart, it will transform your organization. In 2012, I was asked to do an all-day leadership retreat at Midland Memorial Hospital in West Texas. I did. And while I was there, the CNO, Bob Dent, my good friend now, told me that their patient satisfaction was in the tank, but they weren't worried about it because they had under-designed this brand new hospital building. In fact, we toured with hard hats. We toured the construction. And when they opened it up, it was gorgeous. $175 million brand new hospital. What do you think happened to patient satisfaction when they opened it up? It went down further. Why? Because they raised everybody's expectations with this beautiful building, moved in the same old invisible architecture, and the gap between expectations and reality got even bigger. And Bob called me up and he said, we really have to start working on our invisible architecture. And so we started with this pickle challenge for charity. They decorated pickle jars and fined each other for making complaints. That's one of them. They had pickle eating contests in their cafeteria. They had pickle cupcakes. They were disgusting. Their HR department put the pickle pledge all the way across the front of the building. One of their respiratory therapists found a tree that had fallen down in a storm. He put it on his trailer, took it back to his shop, got out his chainsaw and started carving it. You can see where this is going, can't you? And then he painted it, and he put a sign saying no sour attitudes. And this is now at the employee entrance. It weighs 2,000 pounds at the employee entrance at Midland Memorial Hospital. As a reminder, anybody who walks through that door, leave your whining and complaining in the parking lot. It has now become a tourist attraction. Here are the results. 9 months later, we did a survey. 6 out of 10 people said my coworkers are more positive than they were when we started. 9 out of 10 people said I personally am more aware of my own attitudes and am more positive. The amount of time wasted on bitching, moaning, whining, and complaining was cut in half, resulting in a cultural productivity benefit of more than $7 million a year. They have almost eliminated overtime and $2.5 million a year reduction in contract labor expenses. Why? Because all of that time that used to be wasted on drama, on complaining, is now being used to actually talk to patients, actually talk to each other, actually invest in their own education. RN turnover has been reduced by 32%, and for the first 2 years, it's 43% reduction. This is millions of dollars in turnover that is not happening. That money can now be invested in other things. Patient satisfaction has gone from record low to record high. In the emergency department, it was bottom 1%. It's now the top 10%. Month after month after month, the director is actually being invited to speak on the Press Ganey Tour. They were the first large hospital to earn our Inspired Award for Values and Culture Excellence. And the impact has been so tremendous that the Midland Independent School District said, how do we do it? This is the superintendent of the school district, and he walked in. He's a brand new guy. They were afraid he was going to pull the plug on it. He walked in, he said, hey, that pickle guy, how come there's not one on every floor of every school in our entire system? And now there is. And in fact, this is an article from the Midland newspaper a couple months ago about how values coaching is giving a new vision, not just to the hospital, but to the school system. And so I want to challenge you guys with this pickle challenge for charity. Here's what we do. We challenge an organization to raise a certain amount of money in a week in quarters by catching yourself every time you bitch, moan, whine, or complain. You're invited to put a quarter in a pickle jar. And you've seen we are making this a pickle-free zone this entire conference. First 30 hospitals to do it raised more than $60,000 in quarters in their 1 week period. That's 250,000 complaints. And this challenge is taking on a life of its own. All across the country, we are seeing singing pickles, dancing pickles, pickle parties, pickle piñatas. We are seeing people decorate their hospitals with pickles. We are seeing people declare their workspace a pickle-free zone. I don't want to hear your whining and complaining. People are bringing in jars and decorating them. And every time you bitch, moan, whine, or complain, you're invited to put a quarter in. One day a guy came in and he said, I know it's going to be a shitty day. Here's $1. I'm paying in advance. We are seeing people decorate pickle jars. This is a hospital in Ohio where every department decorated a pickle jar to represent their department. This is a hospital in Georgia, one of my very favorites. Isn't that what you want to do to people who are always whining and complaining? And my all-time favorite, be brave enough to start a conversation that matters. Whining and complaining is never a conversation that matters. Talking about somebody behind their back is never a conversation that matters. Let's be brave enough to find the blessings in the challenges that we face. Let's be brave enough to find constructive suggestions and work on those instead of just whining about them. This is the staff at the emergency department at Midland Memorial Hospital with their pickle jar. In fact, it is always on the counter at the front, and many patients have confused that and thought it was a tip jar. This is Kit Bredimus. He is the director of the emergency department, and there's really an important lesson here as well. This is Kit Bredimus today. That was Kit Bredimus a year and a half ago, and 150 pounds heavier. And Kit said, I am telling my people to be more positive. I am telling my people to take charge of their health. I am telling my people to think like owners. How can I tell them that if I'm not willing to set the example? And set the example he did. I was at Midland Memorial when their accreditation surveyors came through a few years ago. All three of them talked about how much more positive the culture was. All three of them talked about the pickle jars. And the nurse surveyor said, the highlight of my entire week, I was up on a patient care unit and I overheard a nurse say to a physician, Doc, you're being a pickle. Put a quarter in the jar. And he did. Every day there's a daily leadership huddle at Midland Memorial Hospital. By the way, I see some people taking pictures of the slides. I'm going to tell you how to get I'm going to send all of you, if you wanted, a copy of these slides so you don't have to worry about it. And every day, that challenge is repeated in every department around the hospital. So in my last 3 hours with you, no, I'm kidding. As we wrap up, I'm going to give you a challenge. And this is a challenge that is for you exclusively. During this conference, I'm going to challenge each and every one of you to pay attention to your own attitudes, your own complaining, and every time you catch yourself whining or complaining, to put a quarter in one of these jars that are strategically located around the place. All those quarters, all that money is going to go to the Medevac Foundation. But here are 5 things I know about every one of you. Thing number 1, I know that you are a positive person and you have good, solid values. Am I right? Raise your hand if that's not you. Did you see how fast those hands went back down? And you don't see yourself as a chronic complainer because that's not consistent with your values. But I also know this, you complain a whole lot more than you think you do, especially if you take into account the complaining that you don't say out loud, you're just thinking it. Number 3, I know that you do not carry around a pocket full of quarters. Number 4, even though I have given all of you, and it's out at the registration desk, a little tally sheet to track all of your complaining, I know you're not going to do it. And I know even if you do track all those complaints and add it up at the end and say, this is how much I know the Medevac Foundation, by the time you get home, you're going to have forgotten it, and you're not ever going to send that check. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you the privilege of being able to prepay all of those complaints. So if you go to the AAMS office booth in the exhibit hall over here, it's booth 1241, it's in the back toward the right, you can prepay your wine fines. And if you donate $20 or more, and this is really not a donation, this is you paying for the privilege of whining and complaining, then you will get a pickle-free person button. And imagine if everybody in this room by the end of the conference was wearing a pickle-free person button and making that commitment to take it back home with them, to share with their organization and their families. Imagine what an impact we could make. And you guys in particular have such leverage because you interact with hospital people, law enforcement people, education people, your communities, you're out there invisible. And if we could get 2,000 people plus here at the AAMS conference to take this pickle pledge to heart, what an impact we could have in trying to create a movement to stop whining and stop complaining and start doing things about our problems. Your $20 donation to the Medevac Foundation will allow you 80 complaints without having to feel guilty. You can whine and complain about the long line at Starbucks, and you've already paid for it. It's okay. And when you go to the restroom, And when you go online to book your flight home and it's been delayed and they're not going to help, go ahead and whine because you've already paid for the privilege. And when you complain about your friends who kept you at Billy Bob's too late last night and poured one last beer down your throat against your will, go ahead and complain about it. And when you want to complain about the boring speaker who started this thing off, that counts double. That's a 50-cent complaint. But you've already paid for it. You've already prepaid. Now, if you do that, if you give $20 to the Medevac Foundation and you make it through the whole conference without not 40, 80 complaints, then pat yourself on the back. Congratulate yourself for being more highly evolved than everybody else. But you're not going to get a refund. Not only that, though, I am going to give you a discount on my next course, a remedial course on self-honesty and self-awareness. Now, if you raise a minimum of $10,000 for the Medevac Foundation, and that's not that much for 2,000 people here, that's easily within reach, then I am personally going to write a check for $1,000 to match the first 10% of that for the Medevac Foundation. Thank you. If it's $9,999, no dice. But don't just stop there. Don't just stop with this conference. Seriously, take it home with you. Take it back to your organization. Start the Pickle Challenge there. Pick a charity. Encourage people to pay attention to their attitudes, their whining, complaining. Do it with your family. And I'm going to help you start it. When you make your donation, you're going to find a stack of this card. It says, Inspiring a Culture of Ownership. And you can check any of the boxes there to sign up for my newsletter or anything else. But if you fill that out and give me your email address, I will send you a link to the slides I've used today. I will send you a link to the introductory video to the Pickle Challenge for charity and a link to the 2 webinars. This is usually a $9 million product, but I'm going to send it to you for free. This was the OR Manager Conference a week ago. Pickle guy actually gave a speech, got a standing ovation. And then we raffled off the pickle guy. We actually had 2 of them there. We have 3 of them at this conference. So there are 3 pickle guys here. One of them is going to find a new home at Cook Children's Hospital in appreciation for their support of this conference and because the kids are going to love this pickle guy. And the other 2, you know the silent auction that's going to happen here? The other 2 are going to be auctioned off. So you can actually take one of these magnificent pickle guys, and they're sturdy, they're well constructed. Imagine this guy sitting in the seat of the helicopter with you. Be a great fundraiser, and you can take it back to your organization. Let me wrap up with this. I want to say a word or 2 about building a culture of ownership. Jim Collins says to have a great culture, you got to start with the right people on the bus. Do you agree with that? I don't. For one thing, you got a lot of people working with you. You can't just choose who's the right people on the bus. Joyce writes a letter to God, thank you for the baby brother, but what I prayed for was a puppy. You can't just throw the wrong people off the bus. Peter says, please send Dennis Clark to a different camp this year. Until some manager has the courage to say, Dennis, you got to stop behaving that way. He's going to show up again. What you can do, you can work on your culture. You can make it the kind of bus people are really proud to be a part of. And when you do that, you will be astonished at the people that you thought didn't belong on the bus who suddenly do. And it begins with having a shared vision. And let me wrap up by telling you about a guy who had a dream. He had a vision, and this was his dream. He wanted a brand new Porsche 911 Carrera GT. He wanted this car so bad he went down to the bookstore and bought a whole stack of car magazines, brought them home, started cutting out pictures, put them up at work, at home, his locker, at the gym. He even put one up on the bathroom mirror. Well, his wife comes walking in, sees that picture. Honey, this is a bathroom, not a garage. Does your silly car have to be in here? And he says, well, yeah, you bet. Every morning when I shave, I look at that picture and I say, there's my car. She just rolls her eyes. You've been listening to those motivational tapes again, haven't you? 2 years later, the man pulls into the driveway. He guns the engine and honks the horn of his Porsche 911 Carrera GT, hollers out, "Hey, honey, come on out and take a ride." She looks out the window. My goodness, that stuff must really work. And they go out for a nice long ride in the countryside. Well, next morning, the man comes down. He goes into the bathroom, and there on his wife's side of the mirror is a picture of Brad Pitt. So a couple years ago, as Rick mentioned, I wrote this book, All Hands on Deck, about building a culture of ownership. CEO of the Porsche Car Company of North America bought one, called up my office, got me on the phone. He said, "Joe, I read your book, I enjoyed it. I would love to have you come out to Atlanta, spend the day with my leadership team." I said, "Well, hey, I'd love to do that." So we talked about programs and calendars, got it all worked out, and finally he says, "So, what's this going to cost me?" And I said, "You know, here at Values Coach, we are big fans of barter. I'll tell you what. I'll give you a full day of my time, all expenses covered. You give me a Porsche 911 Carrera GT. You got a lot of them. You won't miss just one, and we'll call it a wash." And there's some important lessons here. Lesson number one, you have to know what you want. What kind of a person do you want to be? What kind of a culture do you want to have in your organization? Lesson number two, though, you have to be willing to ask. And sometimes ask audaciously and courageously. You may have to ask that negative person in your organization to be a part of this. You know, we're going to do this pickle challenge, and you're such a negative person. I need you to be on board because you're going to have such an impact when people see you make a change. And you never know. When you have the courage to ask for what you want, you never know when the answer might be yes. See, I knew what I wanted, and I asked, and he said yes. And I am now the proud owner of a Porsche 911 Carrera GT that has a racing package that you ordinary mortals can't get. Would you like to see it? There it is on my bookshelf. And so there's a third lesson there. Get clear about what you want and be specific about it. Thank you all very much for being here. Thank you. That's me. And I don't know, has somebody else come up here, or do we just go to break? Rick.
Thanks, everybody. Please enjoy the classes, the networking, and the rest of the week here at AMTC, and we look forward to seeing you throughout the week.